Everybody, 7:45. This is the January meeting of the Raleigh Historic Development Commission. Glad to see all these faces on the screen. Will staff call the roll, please?
Good morning. Nick Fountain.
Here.
Kay Webb. Here. Katie Pate.
Here.
Travis, Travis Bailey. Ian Dunn.
Here.
Rashay Height.
Here.
Heather Leah. Harold Millette is excused. Janine McAuliffe. Oh, I saw her mouth move. John Reese.
Here.
Susan Singer.
Here.
Gatson Williams.
Here.
That is a quorum.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. A chilly early morning. At this point, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda. Somebody raise their hand. Janine McAuliffe moves to approve the agenda. John Reese seconds the motion. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye or raise your hand. Okay, I saw all the hands go up and that carries unanimously. And then I'll need the same motion on the minutes of the December 15, 2020 meeting. Janine McAuliffe moves to approve the minutes. Gaston Williams seconds the motion. Any discussion? All in favor? Any corrections or additions? All in favor say aye, raise your hand. Okay, that motion carries as well. And so the next thing we have on the agenda is a rezoning case, 314 Martin Luther King Boulevard. It's in the East Raleigh South Park National Register Historic District. And let's see, Colette, are you going to explain that matter?
I can give you a brief introduction. We provided a memo on board docs of our initial review of the application that was submitted. We also have Don Belk here as the case planner for that on the rezoning side, if you have any questions. But let me see here. The application itself did not include any conditions relevant to the preservation of the structures. However, the application did mention that adaptive reuse of the structure was the intent. So that's certainly something that you should talk about with the applicant.
All right. I think at this point we will hear from Don Belk, and after that we'll hear from the others. I see there are 4 or 5 people who have signed up to speak, and we'll figure out who should speak first when we get to that. Mr. Belk, is there anything you want to say to us? I am not hearing him. Okay, then we'll.
Yeah, I think this is Colette. I think that there may be a technical issue of some kind. Just wait a moment. We are trying to get Mr. Belk unmuted.
It's always the first person whose mic won't work. While we're waiting on the on Mr. Belk, Mr. Mills, will you unmute yourself and tell me who among the others is to speak and who is first?
We do now have Mr. Belk unmuted.
Okay, great. Well, then we'll go back to that. So, Mr. Belk, I was thinking that it would be appropriate for us to hear from you on the project more generally before we hear from the applicants or others that have signed up. So please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Good morning. My name is Donald Bell with the Planning and Development Department. And I just wanted to just briefly say that this case is scheduled for the Planning Commission on February 9th. However, it will be on the consent agenda to start the clock. There is a 90-day period in which the Planning Commission is required to make a recommendation on a rezoning case. And given our backlog of cases due to COVID, we are putting cases on the consent agenda to kind of start that 90-day clock. And then during that period, we will schedule it for discussion. And I'll certainly keep Colette and the RHDC staff apprised as to when that case will be discussed by the Planning Commission. Nothing really out of the ordinary on this request. As you can see from the memo, it is a rezoning that would take it from its current residential R10 to an office mixed use. This would permit an office building of 3 stories, and the applicant does intend to retain the NCOD designation. As Colette mentioned, the applicant has stated publicly that they intend to use the existing building for this rezoning to give them more flexibility in bringing on tenants for that office building. There are some parking requirements that gave us some pause. I believe there are, I don't have those requirements in front of me right now this morning. I apologize, but I think to meet those parking requirements, they may need to remove there's a small outbuilding to the rear of the main structure. However, I'll defer to the applicant about that. Other than that, it is the proposal does meet the consistency requirements. It is consistent overall with our 2030 comprehensive plan. It is a office use. It's located along a transit emphasis corridor, and it does. We see no issues with this proposal. And the only concern that I have from a site planning perspective would be the parking. However, a specific site plan is not required at this stage, and that would occur at some point after the rezoning. That's all that I have. I'll be happy to entertain any questions about the rezoning process. Again, the first key date would be February 9th. And after that, in sometime within the next 90 days, there would be another planning commission meeting in which this case would be discussed. discussed. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that, Mr. Bell.
Hi, Nick.
At this time- Yes,
I was going to say, we heard through chat that Michael Birch is going to speak first for the applicant.
all right, that's great.
All right, so I
That's great. Okay, Mr. Birch, we'd be glad to hear from you, and then we'll call on the others and perhaps in the order you suggest. So, Mr. Birch, go ahead, and we'd like to hear your remarks, and I also like to hear your comments with regard to the memo from RHDC staff. So, Mr. Birch?
Yes, sir. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yeah, speak up.
Okay, great. So this morning, I believe we also have a applicant presentation if that's able to be loaded. If not, I can kind of just start with my comments.
yes, we'll get that up for you. If you
Okay.
just give.
Great. Well, just as that's coming up, okay. Thank you very much. And you can go ahead and switch to the second slide. In terms of other folks who are on the meeting this morning with me, my colleague Worth Mills. We also have Graham Smith and Elizabeth Wilcox with Site Collaborative, the landscape architect for the project, as well as Nasir Dukes with Progressive Asset Group, the owner of the property. On the next slide, you'll see just kind of a map of the property highlighted in red there on the east side of Ellington, south side of MLK. I will note that just in terms of allowable land use and zoning, that the property immediately across Ellington Street is zoned OX3 and allows office uses. And then to our east, about 3 or 4 properties over, there is a number of properties, about 5 or 6, that are zoned NX3. So there are some commercial or office uses allowed in the immediate vicinity of this property. Also, as you heard from Mr. Belk, from a policy perspective, this parcel is located along a transit emphasis corridor, MLK, which is programmed for high frequency bus transit, and it is also within a core transit area, again, which are kind of those areas around planned BRT routes where the city wants to direct growth, a mix of uses, more intensity. And I think, as you heard from Mr. Belk, that this request is considered consistent with the comprehensive plan. The next two slides are just pictures of the elevations of the current structure. And then that final slide is just a summary slide, and I'll just kind of use that to highlight a few things and speak to one of the comments from Mr. Belk, and then also just the memo itself. So our request is for OX3. That does allow office uses. That urban limited is driven by the city's urban form map that calls for the building to come closer to the road. We also are retaining the NCOD, and I think that this is the Neighborhood Conservation Overlay District that has been in place since 2007. And I think the important aspects of the NCOD speak to form, height, and some of the other comments raised in the memo. So first, there is a provision that controls the front yard setback, meaning that any structure has to be within 10% of the average front yard setback of those other buildings on the same side of the block face. There's also a requirement that the main building entrance face the street from which the building is addressed. So in this case, we would maintain an entrance on Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. Off-street parking provision says that parking must be located to the side or rear of the building. And no parking areas shall be located in front of any principal building. So again, maintaining very much the site layout that is there currently. And then finally, a maximum building height of 28.7 feet. So while we are rezoning to OX-3, which would allow a 3-story building up to 50 feet in height, this NCOD is more restrictive, bringing the maximum height down to 28.7 feet, which really limits from a story standpoint to really a max of 2 stories, again, consistent with the current structure. So we think that the NCOD provisions adequately address a number of the comments that were raised in the staff memo. From an adaptive reuse standpoint, yes, that is the intent of the current owner, is to reuse the existing structure. But it's correct that we do not yet or plan on having a condition that says we are going to retain the current structure. But in the event for some reason that current structure is not retained, we have to comply with those NCOD guidelines. And then we just touch on Mr. Belk's comments about parking. At this time, we do not expect to have to remove that outbuilding. As with a number of adaptive reuse cases, we anticipate that we may have to go to the Board of Adjustment for a parking variance. But I will note that we're proposing an urban limited frontage district, which would reduce our parking requirement below just our standard for office, where we only may need, about 5 to 6 spaces maximum. But again, as with a number of properties along Glenwood Avenue, Hillsborough Street, we may need to seek a variance for 1 or 2 spaces, but that again will be at the site plan stage. So that kind of concludes our presentation. Again, the others that are on the call, really here for any kind of help me address any questions that the board may have. Again, we appreciate the opportunity to address you all, and again, think that the NCOD regulations adequately preserve the context of the existing site layout and structures. And again, we're here to answer any questions the board may have.
All right, thank you for that. Let's see. If you pull down that slide, we can see each other's faces, and I will open it up to questions from members of the committee. Raise your hand and I'll call on you if you have questions about this matter. I might say that given the timeline that the planning department has put out, if you have concerns and we needed to circle back, there would be time to do it without fouling up the property owner's timeline. Travis?
I had a question in regards to the NCOD overlay. I know we have the Prince Hall HOD to the north, and just say hypothetically, if we were in the future to establish an HOD overlay in the area, how would that work with 2 overlays? Would the NCOD be the primary vehicle for preservation at that point, or would the HOD supersede the NCOD?
Tanya, do you want to answer that question? Of course, it's speculative about a possible future local district. Right now, it's just a National Register district.
Hi, Tanya here. We do have that situation in Oberlin Village, actually, and it has not come up, but the HOD, I do believe would have the most weight, and would carry the day. There is a section in the code that talks about underlying zoning. If there were, so I don't know the exact answer. It hasn't come up yet. My gut is that the HOD would carry it, but if there were a discrepancy, then we would chat with the zoning administrator for the city. So that sort of answers your question.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you for that. Gaston Williams.
I'm looking at Exhibit E to the report, which shows 11 people attended the meeting, beginning with Brian Dale and ending with Reggie Tardy. Are they to be any of the speakers at today's session? Any of those people that attended the meeting going to speak today?
They did not sign up to speak, I don't think. Mr. Birch called the names of everyone on the list that signed up, and they're all part of his team.
Okay, and how do we get, or do we ever get, how do we get a sense of what this 11 people that did attend the meeting, what their comments were?
Well, I will ask Mr. Birch to answer that question. Mr. Birch, tell us what happened at that neighborhood meeting, and what were the kinds of concerns being expressed?
Yes, sir. So we've actually had 2 neighborhood meetings, one for a 500-foot radius, another for a 1,000-foot radius. And pardon me, most of the questions were about just the use itself, understanding that it's going to be office use, understanding that the NCOD is going to be maintained. There were really no other comments. It was a very short meeting that was really just kind of us providing information without a whole lot of feedback. I will ask if any other of the team members, whether it's Worth Mills or Elizabeth, if there was anything to add, I'd ask them if they could be unmuted to provide any additional comment.
Yes, good morning. This is Worth Mills. Just want to make a note that second neighborhood meeting is scheduled for the 26th.
Mr. Mills, your microphone got a lot of feedback.
Sorry about that.
So tell us what you said.
Good. Can you hear me?
Problematic, but go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to make a note that our second neighborhood meeting is scheduled for January 26th. That was all.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chair, if I may. This is Don Bell. There will be a report. There is a report of the second neighborhood meeting that is required to be submitted in advance of the Planning Commission meeting, and that report will be part of the Planning Commission's report when the case is reviewed.
All right, thank you for that. I think Mr. Birch or Mr. Mills, Mr. Belk, if one of you will answer this notion, were the people who were at these meetings primarily non-resident property owners, or are they longtime residents? How would you describe the crowd? Mr. Birch, I'll go with you so that Lee Stevens can figure out who to unmute.
Great. Yeah, I believe if you can unmute Worth Mills, he'd probably be in the best position to answer that.
Yes, good morning. Most of the meeting attendees were residents. I do think that we had 1 or 2 commercial attendees as well, but I'd say 80 to 90% were residential neighbors.
All right. Thank you for that. Now then, back to members of the commission. Are there further questions? Let's see, who've I got? John Reese.
I heard you all speak about the parking, and you mentioned something about it being on Martin Luther King, but nothing. I don't understand how that works relative to Ellington Street, and I'm just a little bit unsure because I'm looking at. I've never really seen an actual plot plan, but I'm looking at the GIS scenario, and I don't see how parking would work on that relative to the building that is intended to stay there in your presentation.
Chair Fountain, this is Michael Birch.
Yeah, please go ahead, Mr. Birch.
If one, I want to make a clarification that given our urban limited frontage district, our parking requirement would be about 4.5 to 5 spaces total. And then just to clarify what I said, that the NCOD does not allow any parking between MLK and the building, the front of the building. So any of that parking would have to be accessed off of Ellington and to the rear of the existing building. But I will turn it over to either Graham Smith or Elizabeth Wilcox with Site Collaborative to kind of, again, touch on the location of the parking.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. This is Graham Smith, Site Collaborative. Yeah, the parking is intended to be accessed the way it currently is off of Ellington. So,
and there's no condition whatsoever that the existing residential structure that faces Martin Luther King will be kept in perpetuity. Correct?
Yeah.
This is Michael Birch. That is correct.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, other questions? Let's see, Katie. I'm not awake yet.
Hey, I was curious. I was looking through the staff memo that mentioned that there was conflicting, that it mentioned adaptive reuse, but also the application mentions that any future construction on the site would comply with the NCOD. So I was curious if we need to reconcile that discrepancy whatsoever in regards to if there will be any new construction. I know there's none planned now, but is it, should there be a condition that there not be new construction, or do we need to worry about reconciling that?
That's, I think, something for us to consider and decide what we think is needed. And if as a result of our feedback, it needs to be a reset next month to with respect to consideration of conditions. It seems to me that would be possible, but personally, let's see what we all think about it. And I don't know how many of you have ridden that corridor in advance of this meeting or lately, but I think part of what we need to be thinking about is, with regard to this National Register District, how do we make all this work in relation to that thoroughfare, and then the properties that are south of this on down Ellington or the other on the other streets. We certainly going to have to recognize things are going to look different along the thoroughfare as time goes forward. The question is, what will be the character of the and how will it transition to whatever other uses? So, are there other comments, questions from members of the committee? All right. So the question is, folks, what do we want to do in this situation? Do you all want to give the applicants, we can do two things. We can ask the applicants what is their reaction to the notion of some a condition with respect to preservation of the stone house, or we can defer it. We can do that now. We can defer it until next month for that purpose. Janine, I saw your head nodding. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I was, sorry if I've got feedback. I was thinking it did make sense to hear their thoughts on the conditions, even just from the staff memo. I haven't heard any sort of reaction to whether they'd be open to some of those, even just as it pertains to that building, even just getting it documented.
Yeah, good point. All right, I'll come back to Mr. Birch. Mr. Birch, you indicated that you thought the overlay district covered adequately the staff's comments, but let's be more specific. Can you talk to us about your attitude and that of your client to conditions with regard to preservation of the structure, or documentation and photographs, or relocating, or any of those sorts of things that come up with respect to an existing structure?
Yes, sir. Thank you. So just on the, I would just say, as we contemplated filing this rezoning, we were conscious of our location in the National Register District, and conscious of the need to kind of preserve compatibility and site layout. And for that reason, instead of removing the the NCOD, we chose to preserve that and maintain that because of the building height restriction and some of the other site layout restrictions, because we thought that that adequately addressed those items. I would say from our reaction to a condition that would require preservation of the existing structure, I don't think that the owner is willing to do that. Again, not because there is a desire to tear down the existing structure. Actually, the intent is otherwise. But again, on a kind of going forward basis, just not having that limitation in the event that something does happen. I think that there is an openness to kind of certainly the documentation of the existing structure with photographs, et cetera. And then I think that, if there were any other, aspects, we have not discussed the relocation of that structure. So that's probably something we would need to discuss with the client, but I don't think there's a willingness for a condition to, retain the existing structure.
Okay, thank you for that. Susan Singer.
Thank you, Nick. I guess what I would say, and I would say this to the committee probably more than to the organization proposing this to us, is I think that decision needs to be driven by the committee. I mean, I would hate to relinquish the responsibility of preserving that building to what happens in the future. And I think that we should think about that as we make a decision about whether or not we approve this. I think tearing down the building, if it makes financial sense in 5 years, will no longer be in our hands. And then what happens? Do we have a strip that looks like a bunch of profit building little buildings like they have in most major cities where there's thoroughfares? So I would like to somehow talk about that as a committee and where our responsibilities are in that. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I understand you. All right, I'll turn down to comments internally, and let's decide how we want to proceed here. Further discussion? Yes, ma'am, Tanya.
Oh, thank you, Tanya here. I just wanted to, do you mind if I just make a brief statement about, where RHDC fits in the whole rezoning process?
Sure, I think that's helpful.
Yeah, so with rezoning cases, RHDC, your responsibility, you review and you make a recommendation. I typically to the Planning Commission, because that's the next body going forward. If for some reason we miss Planning Commission, then it would be to City Council. Planning Commission then makes a recommendation on approval or denial that then goes to City Council, who ultimately makes the decision. You work with the applicant and try to get the applicant to come up with to offer zoning conditions that will provide some level of protection or mitigation. But the process is, though, all conditions must be voluntarily offered by the applicant. It is very different than the certificate of appropriateness process, where you can impose conditions of approval. And so it's just a very different way of thinking. So that's all I wanted to say.
All right, thank you for that. Now, discussions within among members of the commission, Gaston.
I'm undecided in some ways about what to think. I'm a little concerned about the lack of willingness to put a condition on the structure, because then if there are none, and I understand the applicants wanting to have freedom and flexibility, but from our point of view, of the historic point of view, it'd be in our interest and in the interest of historical issues, maybe not to have conditions and have them, if they decide to change the building and demolish it or whatever they decide in the future, to have to undo those, as opposed to us having to reimpose them. I'm saying, which shifts kind of the burden. I'm not too worried about the adaptive reuse of the building, because this building's pretty big, and having projected 10 people in the report in the building doesn't seem to be that inconsistent, but tearing that building down and rebuilding something is just gives me a problem. That's my thought.
All right, other discussion from members of the committee. The mitigating impact issue was mentioned in the staff's assessment, and we certainly can pass. We can pass a resolution that we believe the condition with regard to preservation should be considered. Secondarily, that we believe a condition regarding mitigating impacts should be considered. We can do both of those things if you all want to do it. Now, whether it winds up happening, at this point, the house is not at risk, but as the city continues to grow and growth moves out from the area of Shaw and the convention center and the Mamandi, then there's going to be pressure to increase height and the like. And so that may be 5 years and it may be 25. But there's going to be since this is only a national register district, there is ultimately a limit on what we can do about that. So the reaction of the property owner is not totally surprising, but maybe our job is to play that note that we ought to play and move ahead. What other comments from the rest of you as to what you think we ought to be doing here? Do y'all want more time, or do you want to go ahead and deal with this based on a couple of things that we've already talked about? John Reese, I see you nodding.
And Chairman Fountain, this is Michael Birch. I do have one thing to add that I think may be helpful. If the property is rezoned to that OX, then typically the code would require neighborhood transitions to the east and to the south, which impose like 50-foot setbacks, the need for a wall or a fence and those types of things. Now, those transitions will not be required when the existing structure is used as office. But under a new text change, if that building was to be removed, then those neighborhood transitions would come into play. Now, on a lot of this size, those constraints are, incredible and imposing, and really limit development on that property in a situation where the existing structure is removed. So I would say from a incentive standpoint, there is already a great incentive for the owner to maintain and use that existing structure, because being able to use it for a non-residential use without that structure is really, at this point, given those transitions, without a variance or something in the future from some other board, is really limited. And again, would just reiterate, just because I heard a comment about height, that again, there's nothing about this zoning case that's changing the height limit. It will remain at 28.7. And so if there was anything in the future that wanted to increase height to accommodate more intense development, then that would come back through the rezoning process and back in front of RHDC for a review and recommendation. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. Okay, John Reese.
Okay. What Mr. Birch just presented really brings up a concern of mine, because now I'm very quizzical about why a condition to not keep that house in perpetuity would not be considered by the owner. It's almost, I think his previous statement counteracts the lack of condition.
Well, my reaction, John, is that most property owners would think, we've got a lot of things on us already. Just as a philosophical matter, we don't need another one, because the house is probably going to need to stay anyway without major rezoning changes. And so but I'm glad to hear from Mr. Birch in answer to that question. Mr. Birch, does your one answer contradict the other answer?
No, it doesn't. I think it was intended to say that even without a condition, there are a multitude of reasons for the owner to preserve the existing structure. Now, I did mention that if for one reason or another that existing structure was not preserved, the owner would have to go through likely a Board of Adjustment case, a variance case, to minimize those neighborhood transitions. Obviously, the conversation at that point in time with adjacent neighbors is about mitigation on adjacent properties. And so I think my comments are not inconsistent. There is currently provisions and things about the code and the zoning that incentivize preservation of the existing structure. And then in the event that that existing structure is not preserved, then there are things in the code that ensure compatibility with surrounding properties and mitigation of impacts on surrounding properties.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Birch. Further discussion. So we have 2 or 3 things we can do here. One, we can indicate that we in the absence of such a covenant, on preservation, we oppose it. We can indicate that we wish to take all steps to encourage the preservation of the building, and we would want mitigation considered. And then the other one is with regard to the staff's middle comment. You note that they indicated that we might also consider conditions regarding what what new construction might look like and to encourage that to be consistent. Now that's further down the road because right now we're not thinking about taking the house down anyway. But before we act on this, I thought I might reference a mechanism to encourage any new construction to be compatible with the surrounding area on the side streets. Seems to me though, what we need now is a motion that we can discuss because there's not going to be new information. It doesn't seem to me between now and next month, we may as well deal with it. So that said, John Reese, you want to try a motion to see if it gets a second?
I move that we oppose this rezoning case.
All right, there's a motion to oppose, and there for a second, Katie Pate, is that a second? Okay, now discussion on the motion, Gaston.
John Reese, would you be okay with an amendment to your motion without, say the words without conditions?
All right, yeah, so he says a friendly amendment that he opposes it in the absence of conditions related to mitigation, related to preservation of the structure. All right, and there's a second to that motion. Is there further discussion? And would you guys want that the text of that motion to include each piece of the staff's comments regarding the adaptive reuse, the future design, and the preservation mitigation?
Yes.
All right, then let's see, Janine, you had your hand up.
Thanks. Yeah, I guess I do have a question here. Are we headed towards adding in conditions that we're recommending, or are we voting that, or are we leaving it as, we don't approve this without conditions? I'm just trying to be clear what we're working on.
Well, that's going to be up to the movement, I think. But my thought is that we need to be specific, a little more specific, and give more guidance as to why we are concerned, because the Planning Commission ultimately is going to read this.
Okay, thank you.
John Reese, do you want to include these things in your motion?
Yes, I do. And I think if the motion needs to be more clear, it is about that the existing residential structure at the corner is kept in perpetuity and preserved, if that makes any sense or clarification.
All right. That's it. That's his clarification. Let's do this so that we'll all be clear. We may not all feel quite the same way, even if we're substantially in agreement. John, why don't you restate your motion in the way that you visualize it?
I move that we oppose this rezoning case without, if there are no conditions as it currently is requested, and that the friendly request is that they maintain and preserve the existing residential structure at the corner of Ellington and Martin Luther King.
All right. So you understand, members of the committee, the context of his motion. Is there further discussion on the motion? Okay. If there's no further discussion, then I'll call for a vote on the motion. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye or raise your hand so we can see the hands.
Aye.
All right, and then persons opposed. All right, Kay Webb opposes, and I do as well. And the motion carries 8-2. And so that's where we are, and that matter has been dealt with for today. Now, we will have an opportunity to see what this motion looked like in the minutes and in whatever gets sent forward, and we can look at it. Kay, just before we move on, Kay, do you want to say what was your concern in opposing the motion?
Well, my concern is I think it's too restrictive to say that the house has to stay there in perpetuity given the circumstances and our power and authority in it. I have no problem with imposing conditions, but I think that condition is too restrictive.
Yeah.
Based upon reality.
Yeah, my concerns were similar, and but anyhow, we'll see where it goes from here. I think the property owners are hemmed in pretty well and are making some reasonable efforts to meet us, but there might come a day when that thing comes down and we'd regret it in the absence of opposition. So I get that too. Anyhow, I'm ready to move on.
Nick, can I just say one more thing? And I understand owners' rights. The issue here is developers or owners coming into historic neighborhoods and claiming owners' rights when they could choose other properties to develop that are not so relative to the historic fabric of the existing neighborhood. I think this is an opportunity as a lesson, as an understanding to encourage developers to work with existing fabrics instead of just coming in, buying it, and wanting to just say, well, I want to do with it what I want to do with it. That's the I think the real issue here in terms of we as a commission really standing for how to work with, not just buy and get rid of. That's where I'm coming from.
Thank you for that. We're going to move on. The next matter is rezone of 2812 Hillsborough Street, and I will say to you that I received an email. Tanya and I received an email from the property owners indicating that they were unaware that it was coming up on the agenda this quickly, and they were not prepared with a presentation, and they're not signed up to speak, and they asked that this matter be deferred. And so since deferring is one of our best things, without objection, this matter is postponed until such time as the interested parties ask that it get put back on the agenda. So that allows us to move ahead, and that brings us down. Nothing else on UDO matters. The next category is CLG duties, and we need to consider the Hubert Haywood house, and which I believe was the name change issue. Tanya or Colette, you want to remind us what the point is here?
Hi, Tanya Tully here. Yes, you got it exactly right. There's been a request to rename the Dr. Hubert Benbury Haywood House to the Hubert and Marguerite Haywood House. There was a joint public hearing with City Council on January 5th. There were no comments. We did receive information from the State Historic Preservation Office saying that they felt that there was enough information to support the renaming. And your job today is to make a vote on whether to recommend that City Council adopt an ordinance renaming the historic landmark. And a draft of the ordinance, and as well as all the other information was on the agenda. So just seeking a motion and a vote from you all.
All right, I'd entertain a motion, Katie Pate.
I make a motion to recommend that the city adopt the draft ordinance of the renaming of the Dr. Hubert Manbury Haywood House.
Is there a K-Web second set motion? Is there any discussion?
Just briefly, one brief question. Does anybody know why they dropped doctor from it? His second name?
Tanya?
I do not know. It was just the request of the applicant.
Okay, I just wondered if it was an error, whether it was typo or whether it was deliberate. That was just.
No, it was deliberate.
Thank you.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor indicate by raising your right hand. All right. I'll vote aye as well, but I didn't see a vote from Travis. Everyone else voted aye. All right, so that motion carries unanimously. Now we'll move to the next one, which is the Josephus Daniels house. And Tanya, can you give us the same explanation on it?
Absolutely. So the application for the Josephus Daniels house is to remove a historic landmark designation. This was also heard on January 5th. And the State Historic Preservation Office also said that there was sufficient information in the request for y'all to render a recommendation to City Council. So your choice, well, you can always defer, but really your choice today is either to vote to recommend keeping the property a landmark or to recommend removal of the designation. If it stays a landmark designation, there's no ordinance. So the draft ordinance that was included in the application was for the removal of the designation.
All right, Justin Williams, you have a motion?
Yes. I move that we recommend adopting the ordinance repealing and removing the historic landmark designation for the Josephus Daniels house.
Second to that motion. Versailles Height seconds the motion. Any discussion?
It's Tanya here. But before, well, it looks like other people, so maybe I'm jumping in ahead. I was just wondering if you wanted to, I know there have been discussions before, but I was wondering if you wanted to have anything on the record that talks about why you're making this recommendation.
We had we could beef up the motion, but I think that needs to be wordsmithed, but we did have a lively discussion, even though brief, in our last meeting about this.
My reaction is that we had a considerable discussion and had a special meeting so that we could review those issues, and we did so really thoroughly, and so I called on Gaston because I was pretty sure he was going to make the straight vanilla motion, and that we're not going to take another hour to figure out what all need to be said in the motion. But we don't have to do it that way. We have a motion and a second, and if the sense of the body is that we want to say more stuff, then we'll have to think about what that needs to be and how it needs to be expressed. So that's where we are on that. Katie, you had your hand up a while ago.
Yes, I did. I just wanted to say that after the city council meeting, when they heard this, that I had a member of the public reach out to me and specifically ask that we voted to de-designate this home. So I think that we're making the right choice.
We simply have heard nothing about no hue and cry to leave the designation in place. And for all the reasons that we've discussed, pros and cons, et cetera, but we've been through that at some length. Further discussion? Are you ready to vote? All right, everyone in favor of the motion to remove the designation and to adopt the ordinance signify by raising your right hand, saying aye. All right, the motion carries and it is unanimous. I vote aye. So that takes care of that item, and we don't have any National Register nominations today. So the next item is the upcoming retreat. Tanya, I'll hand you the ball for that purpose.
Okay, hello again. The retreat is scheduled for January 25th at 5:00 p.m. You will receive a WebEx invitation to that later this week, and it's back up here just to have one more opportunity to make sure that staff has the right things on the agenda. Last month, in the minutes, there were a couple things mentioned, and in looking back at them, I realized I didn't understand completely. One of them is the idea of understanding the historic fabric versus individual properties, having a brief overview of accomplishments of the commission. So sort of like, I guess, a little, I think Nick called it a highlight reel. Focus on your impact to preservation, and then discussion of the revolving fund and potentially a new one or increasing the amount, and then potentially some research projects on African American history. So if there's anything else that is missing from that, please tell me.
Rashay, hi.
Hi, I'd like to add, based on today's rezoning discussion, I'm curious about what our responsibility is to areas like the East South Park National Historic Overlay District. It's national, but it's not necessarily considered a Valley Historic Overlay. And so just to, when those things happen, what is our responsibility to that area? Are we investigating it with the rigor to determine architectural significance in the area and things like that? So when we want to impose certain conditions or talk about preservation as far as our role in it, do we use those as an opportunity? Yeah. So anyway, I'd like more information.
All right. So that comes on the heading of Tanya, of training commission members to know what their job is in these various contexts, and what's different depending on whether it's National Register or local when rezonings come up. I think Travis, you had your hand up.
Yes, I know it's come up in past retreats before, but I wanted to ask that the website be included in the discussion. I bring that up because I was trying to access it just earlier, and I'm noticing that the security certificate has been revoked. So I don't know if anyone can actually even access our website at this point.
We better have a look at that, and maybe in advance of the retreat, Community Awareness Committee can back up and have a quick look as to what's happened there. Did we drop the ball somewhere or something? Let's see. Who else wanted? Let's see. Anybody else? Ideas? John? And then I'll get to Jay.
I wanted to make sure that in this retreat we discuss basically a mission statement. I know there is one, but in terms of clarifying what we're looking for when we go through and discuss, like today, that zoning case, the issue of property rights versus intent to maintain historical character or historical history in general, in addition to discussing and understanding that, as I understand it, we are to really talk about in particular house and COA discussions, how it affects the neighborhood, not just focusing on that specific structure as if it were on a plate outside of that district. Sometimes I think we get into the nitty gritty details of, is that the right siding? Is that the right setback? Is that the right, height for that specific house? And we don't really encourage or discuss the overall fabric of the neighborhood and its setbacks and its existing character relative to, I just think we sometimes get into the weeds versus understanding the overall. And I'm trying to encourage that we have some kind of discussion relative to those issues.
All right, John, I think some of that needs to be in COA trainings because it might not affect everybody, but to the extent that it affects these rezoning things that we all have to deal with, then that comes up. And I think the brief answer is that looking at siding, looking at window materials, et cetera, are a precursor to trying to decide if this particular proposal is consistent or not inconsistent with the character of the district, which is all the surrounding property. And because that's the goal, is try to deal with change in a way that is consistent or not inconsistent. So let's see then. Janine, you had your hand up a while ago and I didn't ever call it.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to make a couple comments about the retreat. One, it already sounds like maybe an overly ambitious agenda, but I appreciate the kind of looking back, that kind of highlight and summary, just to kind of, frame our mission and what we've done. And I would add to that, maybe even looking forward, maybe touching a little bit on what Verche and John are getting at, just as far as kind of what's been coming our way and really where we are, what are the kind of issues that keep coming up that we can really impact and where we're focused. And also then I just wanted to clarify, I guess this is goes without saying, it's a virtual retreat.
Yes.
Yeah, it's problematical and also hunger inducing, but
Except we'll all be getting our Uber instructions as to how to fill out the form so our food will arrive in advance of the virtual meeting.
Here.
Yeah.
okay. Anything else about the retreat? Susan?
I guess I wanted to echo what I've heard from the last three people, that it's really important for us to think historically about the building materials and the existence of the structure, but also importantly, how it's going to impact the history of our city. And so I just wanted to go on record saying the earlier statements that it's beyond just brick and mortar. It's actually the texture and fabric of our community. So that's it. Thank you.
So one thing about the highlight reel, which I hung that label on it, but I think the reason it was brought up, not by me, was that to give us a feel for what we ought to be doing is a little bit of a need for a running start to what did people do years before any of us were ever here on this commission, and some of the successes and some of the tactical choices. I was talking to a former legislator that is now, and a judge who's now out in Marion, and he told me that he was on this commission years ago, and I'd never known that at all. It was certainly before me, and I've been here twice. So I thought a little bit of that would help us to get context to what we're doing and these ongoing tactical choices about what is the best way to accomplish the greatest amount of preservation that we can in a fast-growing city. So, Verche Hyde, I think you had a hand up too.
Yeah, and maybe this is more of a general question, not to belabor the zoning cases this morning, but I was curious, is there a portion or does staff get consulted with regards to RDCs working with the city or providing feedback with regard to the comprehensive plan for development?
Hi, Tanya here. Yes, one of your roles, one of your responsibilities as our DC is to review and make recommendations on the comprehensive plan. And as you were talking, that was one of the things I will definitely bring up is like what is in there now, what has your role been, and then that's adding. Yes, you do, and I will talk about how we do it now and if there are ways we can do it better.
And every time there's been a major overhaul of the UDO, then this body has gone through it and tried to seed references to historical context and values through in as many different places as we can, so we have a hook to hang stuff on later. Okay, anything else on the retreat? All right, let's go to committee reports. Ian, you want to talk about research?
Hi, everybody. First on my list is the Weaver House has been demolished. Unfortunately, we did not get the plaque. The plaque apparently went to a family member. I asked the owner of the property to let me know when it was going to be demolished, and he failed to do so. So we didn't have enough notice to get the plaque. But that house is gone, unfortunately. We talked about updating the architectural survey, focusing on African American resources, so that is in the works. The LGBTQ contract is being extended. Virtual community meetings are the next step on that. And the Oakwood report is nearly complete. Just waiting on some small edits. And that's all I have.
Well, that's a lot of stuff going. Thank you for the work of that committee. Now we turn to Katie. I guess that's Katie and community awareness. Heather's not on today. Who else is on community awareness? Gaston, one of you talk about what do we got here?
Well, Kurt, want me to speak, guys?
Yes.
All right. The current project, it's in the works. So it is dealing with COVID and everything else, but having a virtual foodie tour of Raleigh historic restaurants. And the idea would be to come up with 5 restaurants. Examples might be the Mecca, it's in a historic building. The Montague building where Cafe Luna is, and other like buildings and restaurants that are in them, and pick the cooperation of 5 of them to do a COVID compliant virtual tour where they either go from business to business to business, not virtually in person, but under the rules. And there's some type of almost like a scavenger hunt is what we're attempting to do, is to get people drawn to restaurants that are located in historic buildings. That was the thought we're working on right now. We haven't finalized any of the plans yet, but as the COVID situation has gotten increasingly worse, we had it scheduled for like the end of February, hoping that people would be a little more relaxed or safe to move about. It's not going to be, it's all going to be COVID compliant, and see if the situation worsens. But that's what currently is on the drawing boards.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that. Katie, are you on that committee?
No, I'm on research.
Okay. All right. So I didn't know if anybody else had anything you wanted to say on that before we moved on. Okay, on the Lustron House, we had a committee meeting virtually in the last 10 days, and we are at work on following up with a potential buyer on working out and making clear there's some financing available where they can help. And also our former member Laura is working to get price on getting the walls up and put some more money in it, since right now it's hard to sell something that looks like an erector set. And so so that is going on. In the meantime, somebody dumped some carpet and pad on the site, and I went over there with my trailer to get the stuff up. I got some of it, but I'm going to need a person to help because the carpet is rolled up and totally waterlogged, and it's just completely dead weight. So it's going to take more than one person to get it out of there and get it onto a trailer to dispose of. So if one of you is inclined to meet me over there, say 10 o'clock next Saturday morning, then we'll finish that task. Whoever put it there actually had rolled it up and put it in what appears to be where the steps would go up to the porch in the southeast corner. And so it wasn't a horrible looking site, but in any event, it needs to be gone. And we don't need to encourage others to think that that's a great place to throw stuff, since it's a long way out to Durant Road to get rid of things. So anyway, that's what's going on with Lustron. I think we've got some new energy and progress moving toward getting rid of that.
Nick,
COA committee. Yeah, go ahead, John.
I'll be happy to help you. I can't do it this Saturday. I can do it next Saturday on the 30th.
All right. Any volunteers for this Saturday?
I can help you this Saturday if you need it.
All right, Ian, if you can do it, then that'll be great, and then we'd be rid of it. Because I'm not sure what will be, whether I'm around or not on the 30th. COA committee, we had 2 meetings in December. We went through a lot of applications, and that's good in one sense. I mean, there's plenty of activity. The great thing is that it means that the January meeting only has 3 things on the agenda, and so in any normal world, we would be doing that COA meeting, and then we would be going across the street to get a beer. But we haven't figured out how to do that virtually yet, but we're working on it. So COA is going on. Let's see, Tanya, help me with the Dorothea Dix. I can't remember how we left that.
I think Colette's actually better on with this. We're trying to schedule another. We had a brief meeting, but we needed more information. So we're going to schedule another meeting and have someone from park planning staff be there as well.
Okay.
So it was just a quick and dirty update.
Yeah, that's right. I recall that. Well, Colette, if you can stay on that, we don't want them getting too far ahead of us on the planning and development of Dix Park. Kay, do you want to talk about nominations?
Yes, we are preparing for appointment of new persons in July. We have 5 positions. 3 of the positions are eligible for reappointment. So we are essentially looking for 2 new people to appoint. We have a critical need for someone who lives in a historic district or in a historic property. We also would be seeking somebody who has skills that will fit on the COA. An announcement will be going out shortly. If you have anyone that you'd like to recommend, please send that information to the committee. Also, if you have an interest in serving as the chair or the vice chair, you may send that information to me as well. Otherwise, we'll be trying to cajole somebody to fill those positions.
Yeah, so the bottom line is that Kay and I will be going off, and that's a lot of gray hair. Somebody's going to have to, nothing personal, Kay. We're going to have to do a reset here on things. And Kay, I did get a good report on the lawyer. I've forgotten her name now, but that you mentioned to me as a possibility. I think that would be fine. So there's that. And then there was another name that was mentioned to me when I was tracking around looking for a lawyer. A lawyer we might get out of Oakwood. We got another name that way. It's a non-lawyer, but somebody that very much wants to do this. And so we've got some names working, but we need everybody to be looking at that, thinking about the skill sets of the design piece, the history piece, the connections to city council, anything that will help us move our mission forward.
Tanya here.
Tanya?
I was just going to say that from the officer standpoint, we will need to have some, folks prepared to be nominated. The announcement for voting on officers goes out in February, and y'all vote on them in May. So just as you think, you've got another, month or so to think about if you want to jump into a role. The other piece is just as a reminder for the nominations, the way y'all work it as RHDC, we seek candidates, you talk to people, we know what skill sets that we need, and then the commission puts forth a handful of candidates to city council for them to to choose from, so that ideally we are getting people who will help further the mission of the commission.
Sometimes we have gotten potluck from city council and they've been great. And sometimes we've gotten somebody who didn't know what they were getting into and it didn't really work very well. And
I think you were potluck first go around, weren't you, Nick?
Yeah, maybe I wasn't the one that worked out great, but yes, I went through the side door and just got to thinking about it after my house project and got hold of Meeker and told him I thought I could help. And so they were all surprised at the first meeting when I walked in. But anyhow, we can, you don't know where you're going to get folks. So we need to be thinking about it. And so if there are people that we've seen through COA that we thought would be great, or if we could get Laurie or somebody else to re up now that they've been gone a year, there are a variety of ways we can do this. We need a mixture of new blood and experience in this process. So, okay, that's it on nominations. But Kay, you and I can talk, and let's see. Oh, is it Gaston that's the other member of our committee? I'm trying to recall now. But if none of you step forward, then there will be somebody getting pushed because we are going to fill these jobs. So. Okay, so there we go. I mean, I see leaders all over this screen in front of me. So no doubt about the talent level in the place. So other business, anything from staff, anything else? Tanya, y'all got anything at all? Colette?
We're good.
Okay. Then it's not too bad, folks. It's about 8 minutes after 9. And unless there's something else, we will see you at the retreat, if not in some other committee before that. So thanks, everybody. Go back and get your other cup of coffee. Bye now.